Happy Mother's Day to our mothers and to all. Last week we celebrated White Lotus Day as a tribute to HPV, who we think of as mother of this noblest of all teachings known as Theosophy. But then it is said that HPV shrieked in horror when someone tried to bow down to worship her. For she knew that she was merely passing on the ancient common sense teaching which we cannot trace back to any one person. Like today's mother, she took into herself a seed, nurtured it, in her case under direction of masters of wisdom, and passed on seeds to the few who have promise of dedicating themselves to living the selfless life necessary for humanity's future. The mission of ULT is to pass on seeds as we found them to the few who find us. The ULT declaration is, the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Reformed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists says, being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. I'm going to stop and go back to the beginning, and because we have a mother who just came in, and we have a greeting for all mothers and everyone. Happy Mother's Day to our mothers and to all. Last week we celebrated White Lotus Day as a tribute to HPV, who we think of as mother of this noblest of all teachings known as Theosophy. But then it is said that HPV shrieked in horror when someone tried to bow down to worship her. For she knew that she was merely passing on the ancient common sense teachings which we cannot trace back to any one person. Like today's mother, She took into herself a seed, nurtured it, in her case, under direction of the Masters of Wisdom, and passed on seeds to the few who have promise of dedicating themselves to living the selfless life necessary for humanity's future.
Today's reading comes from The Voice of the Silence. The title is The Seven Portals. Upadhyaya, the choice is made. I thirst for wisdom. Now hast thou rent the veil before the secret path, and taught the greater jnana. Thy servant here is ready for thy guidance. 'Tis well, Shravaka. Prepare thyself, for thou wilt have to travel on alone. The teacher can but point the way. The path is one for all. The means to reach the goal must vary with the pilgrims. Which wilt thou choose, O thou of dauntless heart? The samtan of I-doctrine, fourfold dhyana, or thread thy way through paramitas, 6 in number, noble gates of virtue leading to bodhi and to prajna, 7th step of wisdom. The rugged path of fourfold dhyana winds on uphill. Thrice great is he who climbs the lofty top. The paramita heights are crossed by a still steeper path. Thou hast to fight thy way through portals 7 strongholds held by cruel, crafty powers, passions incarnate. Be of good cheer, disciple, bear in mind the golden rule. Once thou hast passed the gate, Srotapati, he who the stream hath entered. Once thy foot hath pressed the bed of the nirvanic stream, in this or any future life, thou hast but 7 other births before thee, O thou of adamantine will. Now for today's talk.
Good morning and welcome, friends. Today's talk is about a little bit about humanity's developing these in ourselves, because at the beginning, just like the animal kingdom, we had instinct. Instinct is very clear, and it does not make mistakes, because we'll see why. But at this stage of our development, we have developed the intellect, the reasoning powers of humanity. And I should maybe put some reason up here too. Reasoning. And we rely on our mind and our reasoning powers more than any other. And if we go to the scientific world, this is all that they are doing, because they're not interested in cultivating any other in ourselves, because they only look at things that we can touch, see, and feel. If it doesn't exist, as far as they're concerned, for physical experimentation, it's not there. However, psychological field is making an impact in that field, and as it opens itself up to further experimentation on the field of perception, perhaps physical science will follow. Now, it is stated in the dictionary, and I'll read it to you, as to how we differ in the theosophical parlance. It says, reason is a faculty of the mind by which it distinguishes truth from falsehood, and which enables the possessor to deduce inferences from facts or from propositions. And we have deductive reasoning in that, and inductive reasoning. And deductive is from general principles to particulars, and inductive is its opposite, from particulars to the general. Logic is the science of reasoning, whose chief end is to ascertain the principles on which all valid reasoning depends, and which may be applied to test the legitimacy of every conclusion that is drawn from premises. And here we have intuition, the act by which the mind perceives the agreement or disagreement of two ideas, or the truth of things, immediately and without reasoning or deduction. If we were to define intuition in from the theosophical viewpoint, one, the reason would be manasic, reason or intellect, and intuition belongs to buddhi. These terms are not available anywhere else. And buddhi is wisdom. So this is a difference. And both of these can be cultivated, and we have been cultivating our reasoning intellectual powers through education, because we all have systems that we abide by from childhood up, and we learn what is taught, and that develops our reasoning powers. But intuition requires a different methodology, and the voice of the silence, that letters that have helped me, actually a very good direction in those two books as to how we are to cultivate our intuition. So in ordinary course of our daily lives, we're all dependent on reasoning, inductive and deductive, in order to guide our conduct. Either method is useful, excellent, and necessary from where we are, when properly applied, but either can be subject to abuse, and so be made a means to error instead of truth. And what are we talking about here? Well, we said that we start with premises, and we reason, and we come to conclusion. And then our activity follows what we decide upon. And here is the key. If we start with wrong premises, where is our conclusion going to end up? Is it going to be correct or incorrect? And a lot of people do not look at ideas or make a reference to a generalized principle when we are doing this reasoning. We are all in it together. This is how we do it. So, for instance, for a chemist and physicist, induction is what they use, because they use particulars to come to general hypotheses. But depending what they see, is it real or is it unreal? Does the facts change when we go onto a different plane? And they normally do, but physicists and chemists are not aware of it. So if the collection of facts is wrong, then through that extension, what conclusion we come to is also wrong. Now, Mr. Judge and R.C. have two articles that would be probably very useful to read, and one is called Reason and Intuition, and the other one is Instinct and Intuition, and both of those articles are available for perusing. So we see that in those fields there are a lot of discoveries made, but what use do we put the discoveries to? Discoveries are made. What use do we put it to? We need to ask that question, because in our society today, we need to be very careful as to in which direction we are going with our discovery and to what use we are putting it to. Now, Nobel had discovered explosives in his time, and he left all of his wealth to furthering inquiry in that direction, in scientific field, in other words. And he thought that people would come up with discoveries that would add to our knowledge base and to use of it to benefit humanity in general. But we know that that's not what happened. We use explosives in the wrong direction. So what is that dependent on? What is the explosives or any other discoveries used dependent on? It depends on the ethics and morality of whoever is coming up with these suggestions as to what use we are going to put it to. And there are a lot of leaders, but when we look at the leaders, each human being must decide for themselves where is the ethics of what is being suggested. And where is it going to lead us? Now, according to this philosophy, we're one. There's only one oversoul. And we're all interlinked. So humanity is one family. All of the different nations just are different branches of that family. So depending where we are born, we're going to speak a specific language, we're going to have a particular way or a mode of thinking, we're going to have culture. So we have to deal with all those things. But at the root of it, if we understand that we're all linked together, then whatever is discovered would be put to the right use and not for money making, because money is necessary for life, but then we have to ask how much is necessary. Are we taking too much or are we doing too little? And these are all individual questions each one of us must answer. Now, in this article that R.C. wrote, he says, at the root of all evolution is the spirit. And there is only one spirit, and it's just distributed everywhere. All beings, he says, below man, are evolutions, each in its own degree. Even in the mineral kingdom there is form, whether that form be of a crystal or an atom. It is a spiritual something with a psychic nature, expressing itself according to its own acquired nature. Crystals have their own particular sympathies and antipathies, attractions and repulsions. Are these mechanical, he's asking? Not in the least is the answer. They are all inherent instinct. Inherent. And this is important to understand. And he says, if the mineral kingdom did not have a psychic intelligence, man could never use it. The same is true of the vegetable and animal kingdoms, and they add something to that inherent instinct. Then coming to man, we find that we have power transcending conditions, and we're standing apart from them and looking at them. We are self-conscious. Those are not. So we actually are midway between the lowest and the highest. Humanity is midway in this evolutionary process. Midway. So it puts tremendous responsibility on humanity, because all of the kingdoms below look up to us for direction. Our actions do influence them. So our lives are all in the body and all of the other sheaths, and we're using them, and it's all from these lower classes. And we take what we need and use it for blood, bones, tissue, brain. So it is the food that enables us to go on with this evolutionary process. And what he's saying is that we need to be mindful of their inherent instinct to add to it rather than subtracting from it. Because what do? We impress them. We impress the lives. Impress. In other words, what we borrow from nature, we should uplift, not throw them further down in the sequence of the evolutionary process. So, this inherent instinct, what is it? Let me go over here. It says it is acquired knowledge and experience of a whole hierarchy of beings acting in the individual being of which that being is unconscious. Does a beaver know why it does what it does? No, but each beaver has the whole knowledge of the beaver family. Each wolf has the whole knowledge of the wolf family, and so on through all the kingdoms below men. Instinct in the animal is the unconscious expression of the individual, of the accumulated knowledge of the race to which it belongs. So, it is inherent instinct, but it belongs to the whole family or tribe that that animal or species belong to. Excuse me. So they gain it, it's inherent, but they gain it through experience. The accumulated instinct actually is akin to wisdom. It's in the lower kingdoms. They use it, and it is precision oriented. We see the birds making their nest. Each species have a different kind of nest, and they know exactly how to build it. So you can see that it is precision oriented, and it is inherent in each one, and they know what to do with it, and it never varies. It's very precision oriented and clear. So what then is the difference between instinct and intuition? It is the conscious use by the individual man of the stored experience of the whole human family in all places, on all worlds, at all times, and in every direction. Each man being an embodiment of the whole race, the whole of the race nature seeks to express itself in the individual man. And that's the difference. We have lost the instinct. Why? Because instinct develops at the expense of our intellectual use of our reasoning powers. As we grow more and more in intellectuality, we lose more and more of our instinct. And so that precision-oriented, inherent quality disappears for us because we rely on our mind to do thinking before we make decisions. In the animal world, this is not the case. The animals don't have, most animals don't have intelligence. In the higher animals, we see the rudimentary intelligence coming into being, but this inherent instinct in them is their intelligence, really, when you think about it, because without deviation, they know what to do. You see animals looking for food. They know what to eat in the forest and not to eat. And when they're ill, they go to a corner and they know what to do to get better because they know that they have to take care of themselves. So when we observe nature, it is stated, we actually can learn from the lower kingdoms in this department of the instinct. So then we should ask, why, with all this intellectuality at our disposal, because our experiences is the collective experience of humanity if we are to use it in the intuition. But how do we use it? Here is the catch. A lot of people, especially in the Theosophical movement students, they come into the movement with tremendous enthusiasm because they think that they're going to make headway with helping, with doing good for all, and they're very enthusiastic. And this is a given because this is what we are supposed to do. But when we look at the results, we see that the end result is not really what it is intended to be. Why? Because in using their intuition, they think that it is real intuition what they are using. Now we need to be very, very careful in this regard, because in humanity, intuition is Buddhic light, lighting the manasic element in us and making it as precision-oriented as that inherent instinct is in the animals, plants, and lower kingdoms. So let's look at it. Here it is, it's Buddhi, and this is wisdom. And it compares it to the previous ages, not just to this age. That in the previous ages, where this intuition was expressed, and Jesus is one of the examples given, in him, this intuition was clear, precision-oriented, and it lighted him to channel that light through him into the world. So it is precision-oriented. And not only that, it's like lightning, but it is also like a light switch, because he could turn it on and he could turn it off. In the students today, that ability is not there. So we need to be very careful as to what we are saying intuition is, because sometimes it is defined wrongly. So it is light that can be used by turning it on, turn it on, turn it on, and we can turn it off. But if we don't have that permanent quality developed in us to its utmost level, and it is also described in Patanjali's yoga aphorisms, then we need to be very careful what we call Buddhic intuition. Why? Well, psychology or psychic comes into here. And it is stated that most of the student body has to go through this stage also. And this is where the danger comes in. Here it says, instantaneous and unerring cognition of an omniscient mind, instinct is in everything unlike the finite reason, and in the tentative progress of the latter, the godlike nature of man is often utterly engulfed whenever he shuts out from himself the divine light of intuition. The one crawls, the other one flies. Every human being is born with the rudiment of the inner sense called intuition, which may be developed into what the Scotch know as the second sight. All the great philosophers like Plotinus, Porphyry, and Iamblichus employed this faculty and taught it. There is a faculty of the human mind, writes Iamblichus, which is superior to all, which is born or begotten. Through it, we are enabled to attain union with the superior intelligences, to become transported beyond the sins of this world, and to partake of the higher life and peculiar powers of the heavenly ones. And Plotinus defines knowledge with its three ascending steps. The first, he says, is opinion. Second is science, and the third is illumination. then he explains it by saying that the means or instrument of opinion is sense or perceptions, of science, dialectics, of illumination, intuition, or our divine instinct. To the last, he says, reason is subordinate. It is absolute knowledge founded on the identification of the mind with the object known. And then, the man who has conquered matter sufficiently to receive the direct light from his shining ogoides feels truth intuitionally. He could not err in his judgment, notwithstanding all the sophisms suggested by cold reason, for he is illuminated. So, prophecy, foretelling, and the so-called divine inspiration are simply the effects of this illumination from above by our immortal spirit. And so that is the difference between intuition and reason. Reason comes from the monastic element, and it's cold because we use intellect for it. And intuition comes from our divine nature, and it is for the benefit of all because it's wisdom and world of ideas. And this is the difference. This is ideas. The world of ideas. This is where it comes from. Both instinct and intuition have been gained in no other way than through observation and experience. All the instinct of animals is a gain in that particular species along the lines of their own growth in intelligence and expression in their bodies. So man's intuition carries with it all the knowledge existing in his real nature. So we never lose it. It's always there, but we have to cultivate it. How do we cultivate it? We're using it. We have to use it to experience it and to know what is real and what is not real. We have to cultivate this quality. We said it when it's okay. A talk was given about cultivation of Buddhi monastic element, and we said, or it was said, I don't know who said it. It was said at that time that HPB came to give an impulse in the direction of opening ourselves to the Buddhic element. In other words, to move us from the intellectual into the wisdom side of it. So, manas, mind. We all know it works in two different ways. One aspect of it is intellectual, the other aspect of it is divine. And when we do the altruistic steps, which was read in the Voice of the Silence this morning, what is it that we're doing? We're opening our channels up. And we have them, the channels. I have to activate them. No other way can we do it but through that paramitas. Or virtues. And they're listed in the Voice of the Silence. When we have lightning flashes from our Buddhic nature, it shows us that we're not really in control of it because it comes and goes. We don't have it all the time, and we cannot turn it on and we cannot turn it on. So that should really tell us exactly where we are. But when the monastic principle has gained that tendency to follow the higher aspect of itself, This is comparatively speaking. So it pulls it towards Buddhi. And so all those centers automatically get activated. When it is permanently yoked together, that is when that Buddhic light is permanent in us. It is there for our use at all times. So what have we really become? To some extent, we are a perfected being. Because that element is indication that that human soul has been initiated into the mysteries. At this time, this cannot happen without help. And so, let us just conclude it by reading this statement. This is RC. The message of Theosophy was given us that we may reach into that part of our nature which knows and knows. This is not an impossible task, for we are not poor, miserable sinners, and others have accomplished it. They went this way and tested out for themselves, as is the only true way for everyone. They found it to be absolute fact that all this inner knowledge or intuition is recoverable. They know that our ideas, our thoughts, our modes of thinking, our limited understandings of our natures make our hindrances. They know that neither the body nor any environment whatever is detrimental, but that every environment is an opportunity. The greater the obstacles, the more hindrances of circumstance, the greater the opportunity. If we could but be wise enough, if we could open our eyes wide enough to see, we could learn something from the various instincts perceived in the kingdoms below us. All those beings are proceeding by instinct on that long, long journey which leads to that place where we now are. If we are wise, by intuition, we also will proceed on that small old path which leads far away. The path that all the predecessors of all time have trodden. All the beings who have appeared in the world as our elder brothers, divine incarnations, in past civilization have reached that stage toward which we are now consciously or unconsciously proceeding. Our intuition is not so asleep as we think. It is shining in us all the time. If we will only remove the false conceptions which prevent us from seeing, those of us who are operating on this side of the dark veil can draw that veil aside and let the light shine through. So it is dependent on us as to how we promote that to take root and grow in us, and eventually it takes over in the sense that it influences the higher mind, and then the higher mind controls the lower mind. And that's the sequential order. However, we cannot go through this process on our own at this stage of development. And where does it lead us, this philosophy? To the Master's Lodge. And eventually we get help, direct help from them. Even though we probably get help now, then we know that we are part of that lodge, maybe at the lowest level, but then you know that you're receiving help. And without that help, we cannot go any further. So much we will do, and somewhere we will go, but beyond that we will not. And so now we'll open it to questions. Yes?
So you say we cannot go through this process on our own. You mentioned the parameters and all this. So how do we start this? We have to check out the masters? What do we do?
That was not the statement. The first part of this process is dependent on the individual himself or herself. You have to do this cleaning process for yourself. The master appeared when you are ready for it. It means that you have done all the work that you possibly could have done. And what is it that is expected of us, really? What is expected of us? Not great things, but the small things. What is it? that if you have found it and you're benefiting from this philosophy of all, that you share it with another who has inclination in that direction, so that the center, what was it that HPP came to do? She said it was very important to formulate the nucleus of brotherhood, that they did not expect the whole world to immediately align themselves with this philosophy, but their intention was that some of us who understand it and know its significance in our lives, that they help promulgate it or give it out to the general public, and that amongst those who are inclining this way, our numbers eventually will increase. Just like she said, the sixth subrace is going to come about on this continent of Americas, the Northern America. And she said there are going to be anomalies at the beginning. In other words, they're not going to look like the fifth race, obviously. Mentally and physically, they're going to be different. And she says, but as the time goes on, they're going to be in the majority. And the fifth that is left over, going along with them in other words, because it takes probably millions of years or thousands and thousands, a very long time for a subrace to come and make itself the major aspect of humanity. It's going to go all over the world, obviously not just here, but the pioneers are going to be over on this. Just that fact should tell us that at first it's a minority group. There are going to be anomalies, in other words, not normal according to the standard that we follow now. But in time, they will be the normal, and we will look abnormal. We will be the pygmies, she says, living side by side with them. And that is our future. But if we do not do this work, are we going to go forward is the question, and not so. The writings, even in this one, Mr. Judd says, this is a necessary process that humanity has to go through it. We either willingly do it or we don't. It's our choice. But those who do not awaken to their inner life in this race is not going to go further, because the subrace that is coming in is going to be a much higher civilization that we have ever seen on Earth, whatever that means. So their powers obviously are going to be superior to what we are exhibiting today, because that Buddhic element probably will be more active in them than it is in us. They're going to be the sixth subrace. We're the fifth. The fifth is Manasic, sixth is Buddhic. When you follow the principles of man, six is Buddhic, and then comes the spirit on top. So it makes sense what they're telling us, and you have to kind of join the dots. So answering your question, you have to do everything in your power to go through this cleansing process and activate all these powers within yourself. No one else can do it for you. But when you have reached that stage, then they will provide help. I'm sure they help us all along the way as well.
So if this makes so much sense, why is it when we go out and try to communicate this philosophy to others, we get these blank stares?
Another talk, but this is not a conversion to this. There is no conversion to this philosophy, right? We said it before. It's not a religion where it expects you to believe in anything. This is your own experimentation into your inner nature. And until that inner nature is awake, how are you going to perceive all this? Yeah, inner nature. Active. And you're activating it through this process. Your inner nature, you have become sensitized to it. What else does it do? It taps you. It says, I'm here. That little conscience. It says, don't do that. that's not the right thing, and you go ahead and do it anyway, you're not listening to it. That inner voice is there. It's just that we ignore it most of the time. This student knows that I have done errors. I didn't follow, I was uncertain. Should I go this way or this way? And eventually I did the wrong thing, even though I knew that the other one was probably better than the one I did. So that is available to us. Mr. R.C. says that intuition is not inactive, it's active. It's just that we're not cultivating it. We have to cultivate it. So if it's not there, you can put the philosophy into someone if they don't have affinity to it. You have to feel for it. You have to feel comfortable in your heart with it. So they tell us it's okay to leave people where they are because you cannot strip their ethical, moral values from them without them becoming active for themselves in it. So it's not the numbers that we are interested in, but the quality also of the people who come into it, that they understand the significance for humanity's welfare in future times, and that they become promulgators in their turn as they go along. That's the key to it. And our numbers eventually obviously will increase, because you can look around and humanity, especially the young generation, is searching and searching and searching. They're not happy with what is. They want to change it. And they're looking for solutions. And eventually it will come. Is your hand up again?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was waiting to see others go up.
Okay, what's your question?
My problem is, I'm trying to make it through the day and the night in this world, okay? You're talking about something that's going to happen in the future, and how do I mean, that's what we're having, the problem we're having. We're trying to balance all this stuff. We're getting these blank stares and stuff that people have never heard of, and yeah, that's where we're at.
Future. What is the future? Was discussing it with our son, and he said to me, "Mom, while you're sitting here, you are already in the future, because what we have discussed in the last hour is the past." What does Theosophy say to us? There is no such thing as future. There is something called the ever-present now, because the soul does not look at events that were past, present, or future. It lives in the now. So we have to learn to live now. Because the moment that passed at the beginning of this talk is the past. What we are discussing is now, and in an hour's time it will be the future. The future is now. The soul has no such concept of past, present. It always is, and it lives in the now. And this is the attitude we have to bring into our lives, that they tell us, do what is necessary today, and tomorrow will take care of itself. That not to worry about things that have not come. Mr. Judd says, don't worry. When you come to the bridge, you will cross it. But there's no need to worry about before you come to the bridge, because the solution will present itself to you at that time when you're facing that particular problem. So that's the concept we have to cultivate. But when you think about our own lives, each moment that you have lived, you have made decisions. All of the events that come from the previous decisions you have made. And what decisions you're making now is the future, because it's going to come from that. And that is why this philosophy is called the philosophy of hope and responsibility. I'm sorry, I can't spell today. Responsibility. Yeah. Because each human being, each human soul occupies a body. We're not bodies. We're not bodies. We're not our psychic principles. We're not the mind. We're the soul The soul uses the mind, and the mind uses the brain, its own tool, to get information from our universe. Those are related to the senses. But the Buddhic activity is of the spirit. It is the knower, and it retains all of the memory of all of your lives, and it's the knower because it can tap into the universal aspect of that mind manasic field and obtain whatever knowledge it needs to pass on. It's available to it. So that's the difference. So when that is active, we will have more power, more knowledge, more wisdom how to use the power and knowledge to solve our problems. But R.C. also says in his article that it's not that we don't have power and knowledge at this stage of our development. It is that most of humanity is lazy and obtuse, is what the article says, because they do not wish to do the work. They don't want to work for it. I think this is the word, I had to look it up, obtuse plus lazy. And they don't mean the same thing. One means you're not willing to do it. The other one means you're dull, heavy. You can't move around easily in your mental capacity, obviously not physical. So that's what he says. It's not that we don't have it, it's that we don't want to work for it. Yes?
I was raised to believe that somebody's going to take care of me up there. And now you're telling me, I don't think I'm lazy or obtuse. I think somebody's going to take care of me, maybe.
Who is the somebody?
The guy in the sky.
There is no such thing. There are powers of nature, but we cannot appeal to them because they don't have personalities. They are hierarchical. The powers of nature are hierarchical. There are powers of nature, and HPB tells us in the Secret Doctrine that this world is ruled under strict justice. Justice. We can't get away with anything that we do wrong, but it gives us a chance to correct it. So they are hierarchical. Hierarchical. In other words, they do their responsibility or task with the Buddhic precision because they are spiritual entities. They know exactly what to do. They work together. There is no sympathy, antipathy in those fields. They all work together. This is what we're supposed to exhibit down here because that's our root. The root is harmonious. The root is beneficent. The root is just, and that the world is ruled by these hierarchies that HPB calls the Diane Johanic host in the Secret Doctrine under a strict justice. They have no personalities. They don't feel attachment or detachment. They consider humanity a one. Everyone in that humanity gets help according to law. What's the law? Karma. Karma is the nature's law. It brings us under just reward what we have done right, and under just punishment what we have done wrong. The punishment is not a punishment per se, but an opportunity to correct what we had done wrong. There's no such thing as a one-life theory in this philosophy, because there is no way any one human being as a soul and spirit can reach perfection in one life. When we read The Voice of the Silence, it said, once you have entered, once you have put your foot on this path, you have minimum 7 others, because you have to pay your debt to nature. In other words, the things that you had not addressed correctly, you're going to one by one eliminate them before you're free of it. And then you can choose whether you're going to come back to help humanity or otherwise. So there is no power in the universe where it's going to come to your aid as a person, because they don't function that way. I'm sorry to be disappointing, but we have to do the work for ourselves, and that is how we are going to move forward.
Anyone got questions? Come on, you guys have a lot of questions. You know, you talked about philosophy a lot, but then I'm hearing you also talking about the science part of it. So if this is science, why isn't science accepting it? I mean, you're talking about the pyramids, which to me that's basically the rules. That's science.
Well, you know, some of the scientists in her time were ethical, and I think they were helped. Kekule came up with the structure of the benzene molecule. And I'm positive that these individuals were helped. Kekule was German. At the time he was in London, and he had this reverie in the bus he was going along, and he said he saw the snake. Here's the head. I am not a good person to draw snakes. Biting its own tail, and that's one of the signs of us. And he saw the molecules being arranged on this snake in his mind. And that's the higher self sifting information down, is it not? When the snake, it's biting its own tail. Anyway, so he discovered the benzene molecule that way because it is a circular ring. And look how it was sifted down to Kekule.
What is the meaning of the snake biting its tail? It's
Eternity.
Circle. Eternity.
Eternity. Yeah. Because we come and go.
A circle of everything.
Yeah. We come and go. We come and we're in activity. We go, we're at rest. We don't die. There is no such thing as death. This nonsense scaring people into one life theory is the greatest disadvantage humanity suffers from at this time, I'm afraid. So we need to understand that Theosophy has all of the answers to our problems. The students themselves do not, because they are simply students trying to learn and give what they have learned in sharing it with the general public. But the Theosophy does, because it is old wisdom, wisdom of the ages, which means that it is dependent on the collective knowledge of humanity that was given at the beginning of the Manvantara by the entities that put us on this earth for development, obviously. That's the process, evolutionary process. We come from other worlds, but science says that, we say, the Theosophy says, moon is the mother of earth. Science does not accept it. Yeah. So there is tremendous discrepancies between the scientific world. They're improving all the time, but they're still not where they need to be. But they will eventually get there, and HPV tells us in the Secret Doctrine that the astral is going to be visible in the air, and then when that becomes visible, those who can see it will obviously believe in it at that time. In the meantime, we have to introduce it because humanity's future is dependent on it. If we don't see it, we can't use it, can we? If we can't use it, we won't go forward. It's necessary. It's a necessary step. The psychic stuff that we are going to go through is necessary too, but we need to be able to differentiate in our own thinking process what is psychic and what is intuitional, is what the article is getting at. Because sometimes it is fudged, because our premises are not correct. What the suggestion is that we start with universal ideas first, before we bring it down to particulars. And after we have learned to do that, then go backwards from particulars to universals. That's the surest way, it says, that you know where your information that you're using is coming from, where it is mind related or Buddhic related, that we need to be able to differentiate the two. and that if Buddhic capacity is not at its best, that we not scorn our intellect and our reasoning powers, that there's a lot of knowledge out there already that we can sift through to come to a decision as to what we want to do. And I think it is Mr. Judge who says that the decision that you come to with your reasoning and the Buddhic decision that was sifted down can never be two different ones. That if they are the expression of truth, it will be the same one. And so if you're not sure of your intuitive powers, then he says, go with your reasoning powers, dependent on the accumulated knowledge and facts that you can put together to come to a decision with. So we should not abuse our intellect or reasoning powers either by saying that they are not useful, because they are useful until we develop the Buddhic power.
Last question. What is next week's talk?
The three fundamentals. Next week, please join us. The discussion will be on three fundamentals. Thank you.